Hi guys, welcome back. This is my first video of 2026. I'd like to thank you all for watching me last year, and in this video we'll be discussing the issue of slavery in the USA as part 10 of my series on American history. It has been a while since I've done one of these videos, so thanks for watching. Let's get right into it. Slavery has always been a controversial issue in the United States, but was protected in the Constitution. Many framers of the Constitution believed that slavery was wrong and contrary to the spirit of the Constitution, and wanted to outlaw slavery. However, delegates from the slave states threatened not to join the USA if anti-slavery delegates compromised by including 3 clauses in the Constitution to ensure that they joined. These were prohibited Congress from banning the importation of slaves until 1808, and counting slaves at 3/5 the number of white citizens when allocating seats in Congress. Thirdly, escaped slaves who moved to a free state had to be returned. Initially, slave states outnumbered free states, which allowed them to protect slavery, and the 3/5 rule meant that southern states were overrepresented in Congress when voting for president. All but 2 of the first 12 presidents were slave owners from the South. Majority of states meant that they could prevent constitutional amendments from coming through. The importance of cotton for the U.S. economy created the argument that slavery was essential to the country's prosperity. Despite this, slave states were becoming worried that Congress would outlaw slavery completely. After the 1808 deadline passed, Congress immediately banned the importation of slaves from Africa. Population of the northern states was increasingly rapidly. More representation for anti-slave states in Congress. More states entered the Union as free states, and by the 1820s there were an equal number of slave and free states. This delicate balance between the free and slave states was threatened by the expansion of the USA, where southern settlers from southern states wanted to bring slaves as they settled, whereas settlers from free states wanted to prevent slavery from being spread into new territories. The first major threat was the Missouri Compromise, when the state of Missouri wanted to enter the USA as a slave state, which created a heated argument and debate between the 2 factions, supporting slavery or trying to disband it. To resolve this issue, Congress created a compromise where the northern territory of Maine would be admitted as a free state, keeping the balance in place, as well as banning slavery north of the 3630 latitude line. The growth of the abolitionist movement. Abolitionism was a worldwide movement dedicated to ending the practice of slavery. It grew from philosophical and religious groups that saw slavery as immoral, unchristian, and inhumane. Abolitionists in Europe succeeded in outlawing slavery in Britain and French colonies. In the early 19th century, most citizens in northern states supported ending slavery. They believed that slavery would wither away in the South as it became more industrialized and urbanized. They focused on preventing the spread rather than freeing existing slaves. Most still held the racist view that black people were inferior to white people, but shouldn't be slaves. Rather than being given rights as Americans, they should be returned to Africa. In the 1830s to 1850s, the abolitionist movement became increasingly more radical, which resulted in demands for immediate emancipation, and began to view all slavery as immoral, and Congress as enabling this spread through the compromises of 1820 and 1850. They realized that cotton was making slavery more profitable, and slavery was not dying out in the South. Stories told by escaped slaves raised public awareness. In response, pro-slavery activists began to more aggressively defend and promote slavery. They argued that passages in the Bible condoned slavery, and that slavery was an integral part of the Southern culture and economy. They argued that slavery benefited enslaved people. They argued for the doctrine of popular sovereignty as well. In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act passed, creating the territories of Kansas and Nebraska and opening them to settlement. Both were north of the 3630 line. Therefore, as by the Missouri Compromise, they should be free. However, popular sovereignty was used to decide whether or not these states would have slavery or not. People from both slave and free states flooded into the Kansas territory, trying to influence their vote in their favor. This resulted in 2 rival governments created, one pro-slavery and the other abolitionist, each with its own state constitution. Violence erupted from between supporters of both sides. Kansas became known as Bleeding Kansas. In 1857, the Supreme Court ruling on the case, Scott vs. Sanford, further increased tensions between abolitionists and slavers. The case involved Dred Scott, a former slave living in a free state whose owner wanted him returned. The court ruled that Scott was not entitled to his freedom. It also ruled that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional because Congress had no right to prohibit slavery, and they argued that the Fifth Amendment guaranteed the property rights of slave owners. Bleeding Kansas and the Dred Scott decision made it clear that compromise was no longer going to work. Both had undermined the Missouri Compromise. The only alternative, popular sovereignty, had led to violence. Both sides had become so fanatical that they were willing to break laws to achieve their aims. In 1854, a new abolitionist political party formed to fight against slavery, the Republican Party, formed by members of other parties in northern states who opposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act. They had a strong electoral support in the north and almost no support in the south. Moderates argued against expansion only, and on radical wings for complete abolition. And this is where we will end today's video. We shall continue on with this subject in the next part of this series. Thanks so much for watching, and a happy new year, since this was the first video of 2026.